The Galactic Council chamber had not seen such chaos in 3,000 years. Representatives from 47 species shouted over each other, their translation devices struggling to keep up with the flood of panicked voices. At the center of the holographic display, a dying star pulsed with angry red light. "The Velthari system is lost," announced High Counselor Zethryx, his 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of defeat. "We must begin evacuation procedures for the 12 billion inhabitants immediately." Ambassador Trelvok of the Sindari Collective slammed his tentacle against his speaking platform. "Evacuate to where? We have perhaps 6 cycles before the star goes supernova. There are not enough ships in the entire galaxy to move 12 billion people in 6 cycles." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the mathematics. Everyone understood the physics. The Velthari star had been stable for 8 billion years, but a rare quantum cascade had triggered its collapse. In 6 cycles, it would explode with enough force to sterilize everything within 3 light years. The 12 billion people of Velthari Prime would die, along with the ancient libraries, the sacred temples, and 10,000 years of civilization. "There must be something," whispered Delegate Morin of the Kishi Federation. Her crystalline form flickered with distress. "Our greatest engineers have studied stellar mechanics for millennia. Surely someone has a solution." "The problem was deemed impossible 400 years ago," Zethryx replied, his voice heavy with sorrow. "The Consortium of Advanced Sciences concluded that no technology could halt or reverse stellar collapse. The energy requirements alone would exceed the output of 10,000 suns." In the back of the chamber, a small figure raised her hand. She was human, barely reaching the chest height of most other species present. Her name was Chief Engineer Sarah Chen, and she represented the Terran Confederacy, the youngest member of the Galactic Council by several thousand years. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was quiet but somehow carried across the entire chamber. "Did you say the problem was deemed impossible?" Zethryx looked down at her with the patient expression that older species often wore when addressing humans. "Yes, Chief Engineer. The mathematics are quite clear. Stellar collapse cannot be reversed." Sarah Chen smiled. It was a strange smile, one that several delegates found unsettling. "With respect, High Counselor who decided that?" "The Consortium of Advanced Sciences. The greatest minds of the Velkathi, the Sindari, and the Morthian Combine spent 3 centuries studying the problem before declaring it unsolvable." "I see." Sarah pulled out a small device from her pocket and began tapping on its surface. "And when they declared it impossible, did everyone just stop trying?" The question hung in the air like something dangerous. Zethryx shifted uncomfortably. "Well, naturally. When the greatest scientific bodies in the galaxy determine that something cannot be done, it would be foolish to waste resources pursuing it further." Sarah continued tapping on her device. "That's interesting, very interesting." Ambassador Trelvok leaned forward, his tentacles twitching with irritation. "Human, we appreciate your species' enthusiasm, but this is hardly the time for naive optimism. Your civilization has only been spacefaring for 300 years. You cannot possibly understand the complexity of stellar mechanics." "You're right," Sarah agreed pleasantly. "We've only been spacefaring for 300 years, but in that time we've solved 17 problems that were deemed impossible by your consortium." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Several delegates exchanged confused glances. "That is a gross exaggeration," Zethryx said firmly. "The Terran Confederacy has made some impressive advances, but—" "The Hellion Plague," Sarah interrupted. "Your scientists said there was no cure because the virus mutated too quickly for any treatment to be effective. Our doctors spent 40 years developing an adaptive immune response therapy. The plague was eradicated 2 centuries ago." "That was different," Trelvok protested. "Medical science is not." "The drift fields of Sector 9. Your engineers said no ship could navigate them because the gravitational fluctuations were too unpredictable. Our pilots developed a real-time calculation system that maps the fields as ships pass through them. Sector 9 is now a major trade route. Those are minor achievements compared to the void crystals of Morath. Your mining guild said they were impossible to extract because they existed in a state of quantum uncertainty. Our miners figured out how to collapse the probability waves using focused sonic vibrations. We've been trading void crystals for 50 years now. Sarah Chen stepped forward, her small form somehow commanding the attention of every being in the chamber. High Counselor, my species has a saying. We call it impossible only until someone does it. 400 years ago, your consortium looked at a dying star and decided that nothing could be done. So everyone gave up. Everyone accepted defeat. She paused, her eyes meeting Zethrix's gaze. My people don't do that. What exactly are you proposing? Delegate Morin asked, her crystalline body leaning forward with sudden interest. I'm proposing that we try. Sarah held up her device. I've been sending messages to Earth for the past 10 minutes. Our deep space engineering core is already mobilizing. We have 37 ships with experimental equipment that might, and I stress might, be able to stabilize the Velthari star. Might, Trelvok's tentacles writhed with anger. You would risk ships and lives on might. Yes, Sarah said simply. Because the alternative is watching 12 billion people die while we sit here and discuss how impossible it is to save them. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence was different. It was the silence of beings who were being forced to examine assumptions they had held for centuries. The mathematics, Zethrix began. The mathematics say it can't be done with current technology, Sarah acknowledged. So we'll use technology that doesn't exist yet. We'll invent it on the way. That's what humans do, High Counselor. We look at impossible problems and we get stubborn. She turned to address the entire chamber, her voice ringing with conviction. My grandfather used to say that the universe doesn't care what we think is possible. The universe just is. And if we're clever enough, stubborn enough, and willing to work hard enough, we can make it do whatever we need it to do. This is madness, Trelvok said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Maybe, Sarah agreed. But it's the kind of madness that built our species. It's the kind of madness that took us from caves to the stars in 10,000 years. It's the kind of madness that looks at a dying star and says, not today. She pulled out her communication device and spoke into it. Chen to Fleet Command. Initiate Operation Impossible. All available deep space engineering vessels proceed to the Velthari system at maximum speed. We have 6 cycles to save 12 billion lives. The response came immediately, crackling through the chamber's speakers so everyone could hear. Fleet Command acknowledges Chief Engineer. 37 vessels en route. Estimated arrival, 18 hours. Engineering teams are already brainstorming solutions. We'll figure something out, ma'am. We always do. Sarah Chen looked up at the stunned faces of the galaxy's oldest and wisest species. Now then, she said, who wants to help us do the impossible? The Terran fleet arrived at Velthari Prime in 16 hours, 2 hours ahead of schedule. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the engineering vessel Prometheus, staring at the dying star through the main viewport. It was beautiful in a terrible way, swirling with colors that no healthy star should display. Initial scans complete, Captain, reported Science Officer Dr. Yuki Tanaka. The star's core has already begun collapsing. At current rate, we have approximately 112 hours until supernova. That's less than 5 cycles, Webb muttered. The Council said 6. The Council's calculations were based on standard stellar collapse models. This isn't standard. The quantum cascade is accelerating the process. Yuki pulled up a holographic display of the star's internal structure. The core is losing cohesion faster than predicted. We might have even less time than that. Webb nodded slowly, What do our engineers say? They're arguing, Yuki replied with a slight smile. Loudly, I think that's a good sign. Below decks, in the main engineering bay, Chief Engineer Sarah Chen stood surrounded by the best minds humanity had to offer. Holographic displays filled the air, showing equations, diagrams, and simulations that flickered and changed as engineers debated and calculated. "We can't stop the collapse," announced Dr. Heinrich Muller, head of the Stellar Mechanics Division. "The energy required would be roughly equivalent to the output of the star itself. It's a simple thermodynamic problem." "Then don't stop it," said a young engineer named Priya Sharma. She was 23 years old, fresh from the academy, and had been assigned to the mission because everyone else with seniority had been busy. "Redirect it." The senior engineers turned to look at her. "Explain," Sarah said. Priya walked to the central display, her fingers dancing across the interface. "The star is collapsing because its core can't maintain fusion pressure against gravity, right? The quantum cascade disrupted the normal hydrogen to helium process. But what if we don't try to restart fusion? What if we just move the collapse somewhere else?" "Move it where?" Muller asked, his voice skeptical. "Into a containment field. A really, really big one." Priya pulled up a new diagram. "We create an artificial gravity well outside the star, strong enough to pull the collapsing core material away from the main body. The core continues collapsing, but it does so in open space rather than inside the star. The outer layers of the star, no longer pressed by the collapsing core, expand outward normally. The star might lose significant mass, but it won't explode." Silence fell over the engineering bay. Muller's mouth opened and closed several times. "That's," he started. "Insane," another engineer finished. "The gravity field would need to be generated by something massive. We'd need a black hole." "Or a very dense artificial singularity," Priya said, "which we can create using the Hawking drives from our ships." "The Hawking drives generate microscopic singularities for propulsion," Muller protested. "They last for nanoseconds before evaporating. We'd need something stable, something that could maintain itself for hours." "So we chain them together," Priya said. "We create a continuous stream of micro-singularities, each one forming as the previous one evaporates. If we synchronize them perfectly, we create what appears to be a single stable singularity." "The timing would need to be precise to the femtosecond," someone objected. "Then we'll be precise to the femtosecond." "The energy requirements." "We have 37 ships. We'll drain every power core if we have to." "The calculations alone would take weeks." "Then we'd better start calculating." Sarah Chen watched the exchange with growing excitement. This was what she loved about human engineering, not the technology itself, but the mindset behind it, the absolute refusal to accept defeat. "Dr. Muller," she said, "can you find a flaw in Priya's theory?" Muller hesitated, his face contorted as he ran through the physics in his head. "No," he admitted finally. "The theory is sound, but the practical challenges are challenges," Sarah finished. "Not impossibilities, different things." She turned to address the entire engineering bay. "All right, people, we have a theory. Now let's turn it into reality. I want every mathematician we have working on the timing calculations. I want every physicist running simulations. And I want our best technicians figuring out how to modify our Hawking drives for sustained operation." "Chief Engineer," Muller said, "even if we solve all the technical problems, there's still the question of placement. Someone would need to fly a ship directly into the star's corona to position the singularity generator at the optimal point. The heat and radiation would destroy any vessel within minutes." "Then we'll need to make the minutes count," Sarah replied. She looked around at her team, at these brilliant, stubborn, impossible humans who had come to save a world that wasn't even their own. "We have 100 hours. That's 100 hours to design, build, and deploy technology that has never existed before. That's 100 hours to prove that impossible is just another word for not yet. She smiled, that same unsettling smile she had worn in the council chamber. Let's get to work. Word of the Terran attempt spread across the galaxy like wildfire. At first, many species reacted with disbelief or scorn. The Sindari called it futile theatrics. The Velkathi dismissed it as the reckless arrogance of a young species. But as hours passed and reports from the Velthari system filtered back, the tone began to change. The humans weren't giving up, they weren't even slowing down. On the planet's surface, 12 billion Velthari watched the sky with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. They had been told their world was doomed. They had begun making their peace with death. And then the human ships had arrived, strange angular vessels covered in equipment that even the most learned Velthari scientists couldn't identify. High Priestess Sorrel stood on the balcony of the Grand Temple, watching the tiny specks of light that marked the Terran fleet's position. Her aide, a young acolyte named Vess, stood beside her. "Do you think they can really save us?" Vess asked. Sorrel considered the question carefully. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I find myself impressed that they're trying. Our own people gave up on us decades ago. These humans, these strangers from a distant world, refuse to accept our death." She paused. "There's something admirable in that, regardless of the outcome." In orbit above the planet, the alien observation vessel Serenity of Logic maintained a careful distance from the Terran fleet. Ambassador Trelvok had insisted on witnessing the humans' failure firsthand, determined to document their folly as a lesson for future generations. Instead, he found himself watching something he couldn't explain. "They're not sleeping," his science officer reported, confusion evident in their voice. "Our bioscans indicate that most of the humans haven't rested in over 40 hours. Several have been working continuously for 60. "That's not possible," Trelvok said. "Biological organisms require rest cycles to maintain cognitive function." Their cognitive function appears unimpaired. In fact, our readings suggest they're performing at enhanced levels. Their stress hormones are elevated, but instead of degrading their performance, the chemicals seem to be improving it. Trelvok's tentacles curled with unease. What kind of species performs better under stress? "Predators," the science officer replied quietly. "Pursuit predators specifically. Species that evolved to chase prey over long distances, maintaining effort long after the prey has exhausted itself." On the Prometheus, Captain Webb had given up trying to get Sarah Chen to rest. Every time he suggested she take a break, she just looked at him with those intense eyes and said, "Not yet." So instead, he brought her coffee, which was apparently a human stimulant derived from beans, and watched in amazement as she coordinated the largest engineering project in galactic history. The design was taking shape. Priya's theory had held up under rigorous analysis, and the mathematics were slowly yielding to the sustained assault of human determination. But there were still problems. So many problems. "The synchronization algorithm isn't working," reported Dr. Chen from the Hawking Drive team. "No relation to Sarah, though they discovered they were both from the same region of Earth. We can create the microsingularities, but we can't maintain the chain. There's always a gap of a few hundred microseconds between each singularity's collapse and the next one's formation." "A few hundred microseconds is enough for the gravity well to dissipate," Muller added. "The collapsing core material would fall back into the star. We'd accomplish nothing." Sarah studied the equations, her tired eyes somehow still sharp. "What if we overlap them?" "Overlap?" "Instead of forming the next singularity after the previous one collapses, we form it before. We create two singularities simultaneously, then let the first one collapse while the second maintains the gravity well, then form a third before the second collapses, and so on." "The energy requirements would double," Dr. Chen protested. "Then we use more ships." Sarah pulled up the fleet manifest. We have 37 vessels. If we daisy-chain their power cores, we could maintain overlapping singularities for, she calculated quickly, 6 hours, maybe 7. We need at least 8 hours to extract enough core material to prevent supernova, Muller said. Then we'll find more power. Where? Sarah was silent for a moment. Then she looked up at the viewport, at the dying star that hung in the darkness of space like a wound in the universe. The star itself, she said slowly. We're trying to save it. What if we also use it? What if we tap into the star's remaining fusion output and channel it into our power grid? The engineering bay went completely silent. Engineers looked at each other with expressions that mixed horror and admiration. You want to run power cables into a dying star, Muller said flatly. I want to run power cables into a dying star, Sarah confirmed. That's the most insane thing I've ever heard. But is it impossible? Muller opened his mouth to say yes, then stopped. His brow furrowed. His lips moved silently as he ran calculations in his head. No, he said finally, his voice filled with wonder. It's not impossible. If we use the Prometheus's heat shields as a template, we could theoretically create conduits capable of withstanding the corona's temperature. The efficiency would be terrible. We'd lose 90% of the energy to heat dissipation, but 10% of a star's output is still a lot of power, Sarah finished. Enough power. We'd need to build the conduits from scratch. We don't have the raw materials. Then we mine the asteroids in the outer system. There's a belt about 4 hours from here at maximum thrust. We'd need ships for mining operations, ships that aren't working on the Singularity Project. The Velthari have ships that are sitting idle because everyone assumed there was nothing they could do. Sarah activated her communication device. Prometheus to Velthari Prime. High Priestess Sorrel, are you receiving? The response came moments later, Sorrel's melodic voice crackling through the speakers. This is Sorrel. We hear you, human. High Priestess, we need your help. We have a plan to save your star, but we need mining vessels, transport ships, anything that can carry raw materials. We need your people to work alongside ours. There was a long pause. You want our help? We were told there was nothing we could do. There's always something you can do, Sarah replied. Even if it's just refusing to give up, will you help us? Another pause. Then Sorrel's voice returned, stronger now, filled with something that might have been hope. Tell us what you need. Every ship on Velthari Prime is at your disposal. As mining operations began, and the design continued to evolve, Ambassador Trelvok watched from his observation vessel with growing discomfort. Something was happening here that didn't fit his understanding of the universe. A problem that the greatest minds in the galaxy had declared impossible was being dismantled piece by a species barely out of their prehistoric era. Ambassador, his science officer said, I've been analyzing the human approach to this crisis. I believe I've identified their core methodology. What methodology? They're just throwing random solutions at the problem until something works. That is their methodology, the science officer replied. They call it trial and error or empirical problem solving. But there's something else, something our psychological analysis models didn't predict. What? They believe they can succeed. Not hope, belief. Active, unshakable belief that they will find a solution. Their cognitive patterns show no acceptance of failure as an outcome. It's not that they're ignoring the possibility of failure. It's that they genuinely don't perceive it as a possibility. Trelvok's tentacles went still. That's not rational. No, the science officer agreed. It's not, but it appears to be effective. 72 hours into the crisis, 28 hours until supernova. The singularity generator was complete. It was an ugly thing, a massive framework of human engineering and repurposed alien technology, held together by emergency welds and pure determination. The power conduits were in place, snaking out toward the star's corona like the tentacles of some mechanical beast. The mining operations had provided enough raw materials to build 3 backup systems. Now came the hard part. The insertion point needs to be precise, Dr. Tanaka explained, her voice strained from days without proper rest. We need to position the generator at the exact center of the collapsing core. A deviation of more than a few kilometers will result in incomplete extraction. The star will still explode. What's our margin of error on the navigation? Captain Webb asked. Without manual control, about 50 kilometers. The radiation interference is too strong for remote guidance systems. So someone has to fly in there and position it manually. Yes. The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The pilot would be flying into the heart of a dying star. Even with the best shielding available, even with the power conduits drawing heat away from the ship, the radiation exposure would be lethal. Whoever flew that mission would not be coming back. Sarah Chen stepped forward. I'll do it. No, Webb said immediately. You're too valuable. You designed the system. You need to be here to make adjustments if something goes wrong. I'm the best pilot we have for precision work. You know that. I don't care. I'm not sending my chief engineer on a suicide mission. It's not suicide if we save 12 billion people. Chen. Captain, Sarah's voice was quiet but firm. This is why we're here. This is what we came to do. Someone has to make this sacrifice. I'd rather it be me than anyone else. The argument might have continued, but it was interrupted by a new voice on the communication channel. Human vessel Prometheus, this is High Priestess Sorrel. I have been listening to your discussion. I believe I have a solution. Webb frowned. High Priestess. Your pilot needs to position the device precisely. This requires someone with exceptional spatial awareness and the ability to process complex 3-dimensional data in real time. Is this correct? Yes, but... Then I volunteer. My species evolved in a high-gravity environment with extreme stellar radiation. We have natural resistance to the conditions inside your star's corona. Additionally, our neural structure allows us to process spatial data much faster than human cognition. I am better suited for this mission than any human pilot. The bridge went silent again. Sarah Chen stared at the communication console as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. High Priestess, she said slowly, if you fly that mission, you'll die. Even with your natural resistances, the exposure will be fatal. I understand. But it is my world, my people. If a sacrifice must be made, it should be made by a Velthari. This is our responsibility. It's our plan, our technology, our hope, Sorrel interrupted gently. You gave us hope when we had none. You refused to let us die when the entire galaxy had accepted our death as inevitable. Now let us be part of our own salvation. Let us prove that we too can be stubborn. Webb looked at Sarah. Sarah looked back at him. Something passed between them, an understanding that required no words. High Priestess, Sarah said, if you're willing to do this, we'd be honored to have you fly the mission. But we're not going to let you die alone. I'll be piloting the escort vessel, running interference and providing backup systems. If you go down, I'll be right there with you. That is not necessary. Yes, it is. This is how humans do things. We don't let people face death alone. We stand together or we don't stand at all. There was a long pause. When Sorrel spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. I begin to understand why your species has accomplished so much in so short a time. Very well, Chief Engineer Chen. We will fly together. The final preparations took 6 more hours. Sarah personally inspected every system on the Singularity generator, checking and rechecking, until she was satisfied that everything was as perfect as human engineering could make it. The Velthari shuttle that would carry the generator was modified with human shielding technology, and connected to the power conduits that would help dissipate the stellar heat. High Priestess Sorrel arrived at the Prometheus's shuttle bay in full ceremonial robes. She looked calm, almost serene, as she approached the waiting vessel. "High Priestess," Sarah said, meeting her at the shuttle's ramp, "I want you to know something. Whatever happens in there, whatever the outcome, you've already proven something important. You've proven that the Velthari aren't just victims of circumstance. You're warriors, you're fighters, you're people who refuse to go quietly." Sorrel reached out and touched Sarah's face with one slender finger. "And you, Chief Engineer, have proven something as well. You've proven that the universe is larger than our fears, and that the impossible is merely a challenge waiting to be overcome." She smiled, an expression that looked strange on her alien features but was unmistakably warm. "My people will remember this. For as long as Velthari Prime exists, we will remember the humans who refuse to let us die." They boarded their respective vessels. The countdown began. The insertion went smoothly for the first 20 minutes. Sorrel piloted the generator shuttle with supernatural precision, threading through the star's outer atmosphere like she had been born to fly. Sarah followed close behind in her escort vessel, monitoring the singularity systems and feeding guidance data to Sorrel's navigation computer. Then things started to go wrong. "Heat levels are exceeding projections," Dr. Tanaka reported from the Prometheus. "The corona is more active than our models predicted. You're losing shielding faster than expected." "How much faster?" Sarah asked, her fingers dancing across her console as she ran backup calculations. "At current rate, you'll lose all shielding in 40 minutes. You need at least 55 to complete the insertion." Rerouting power from non-essential systems. Sarah began shutting down everything that wasn't absolutely necessary. Life support, artificial gravity, even the communication boosters. "That buys us 10 minutes. Still not enough. Then we'll find more time somewhere else." The shuttle shuddered as a solar flare erupted nearby, sending a wave of superheated plasma across their path. Sorrel banked hard to avoid it, her reflexes impossibly fast. Sarah followed, her own piloting skills pushed to their limit. "We're approaching the insertion point," Sorrel reported. "Beginning final positioning sequence." The singularity generator came to life, its massive framework glowing with contained energy. Micro-singularities began forming in a precise cascade, each one pulling at the fabric of space-time before evaporating and being replaced by the next. The gravity well stabilized, and immediately they could see its effect on the collapsing core. Stellar material, the incredibly dense matter that had been falling inward toward catastrophe, began to change course. Slowly at first, then faster, it streamed toward the artificial gravity well, pulled away from the star's interior by forces that shouldn't exist. "It's working," Dr. Tanaka's voice came through, filled with wonder. "The core collapse is slowing, we're actually doing it." But the victory was premature. As the singularity generator drew more and more material away from the core, the star's internal structure began to shift. Convection currents that had been stable for billions of years suddenly changed, creating new instabilities that no one had predicted. "We've got a problem," Sarah said, staring at her sensor display. "The star is restructuring. If we don't adjust the gravity well's position in the next 3 minutes, we'll lose containment." "I see it," Sorrel replied. "I need to move the generator 17 kilometers starward, but my maneuvering thrusters are failing." "How bad?" "Bad, I have about 30% thrust remaining. Not enough to make the correction in time." Sarah looked at the distance between her vessel and Sorrel's. She looked at the failing thrusters on the Velthari shuttle. She looked at the stellar readings that showed their window of opportunity closing with every second. Then she made a decision. "Sorrel, prepare for impact. I'm going to push you into position." "What that's?" "Stubborn, crazy, impossible." Sarah was already adjusting her course. "Yeah, well, that's kind of our thing." She hit the Velthari shuttle at precisely the right angle, transferring her vessel's momentum into Sorrel's. The impact rattled both ships, warning alarms screaming as systems failed across the board. But the generator moved. 17 kilometers, exactly where it needed to be. Gravity well stabilized, Dr. Tanaka reported, her voice barely audible over the static. Core extraction proceeding nominally. Sarah, Sorrel, you need to get out of there now. But Sarah's vessel was tumbling, its engines offline from the impact. Sorrel's shuttle was still operating, but barely. Neither of them had enough power to escape the corona before their shielding failed completely. Sorrel, Sarah said calmly, can you reach escape velocity? Barely, but if I go now I'll have to leave you behind. Then go. The generator needs at least one of us to survive in case something goes wrong. Someone has to be able to make adjustments. I will not leave you here to die. It's not dying if we save your world, it's just finishing the job. Sarah laughed softly. Besides, this is how humans are supposed to go out, making the impossible possible, one stubborn sacrifice at a time. Sorrel was silent for a long moment. Then her voice came through, stronger than before. No, I will not accept this. You taught me that the impossible is merely a challenge. Now I will teach you the same lesson. Before Sarah could respond, Sorrel's shuttle swung around. The Velthari priestess brought her vessel alongside Sarah's tumbling craft and matched its spin with impossible precision. Then she extended her shuttle's emergency docking clamps and locked onto Sarah's ship. What are you doing? Being stubborn. Sorrel's engines fired at maximum thrust, dragging both vessels toward the star's outer atmosphere. Your species has no monopoly on refusing to give up, Chief Engineer. Now hold on. This is going to be rough. The escape took forever. Every second, Sarah expected the shielding to fail, expected the stellar radiation to come flooding in and end them both. But Sorrel flew like she had been born for this moment, threading through solar flares and magnetic storms, using every trick of physics and skill to buy them just one more second, then one more, then one more. They cleared the corona, with 2 minutes of shielding remaining. The Prometheus picked them up an hour later, both vessels barely functional but both pilots alive. Dr. Tanaka reported that the singularity generator was working perfectly, extracting the collapsing core material and preventing the supernova. Within 12 hours, the immediate danger would be past. The Velthari star would survive. In the medical bay, Sarah Chen lay in a recovery bed, her body battered by the stresses of the mission but her eyes bright with triumph. High Priestess Sorrel sat beside her, her own injuries minor compared to what they could have been. You saved my life, Sarah said. You saved my world. It seemed only fair. I didn't think you had it in you. No offense, but your species isn't exactly known for reckless heroics. Sorrel smiled. Perhaps that will change. Perhaps you humans have taught us something valuable, not just your technology or your engineering, but your spirit, your absolute refusal to accept defeat. She reached out and took Sarah's hand. When the council told us our world was doomed, we believed them. We gave up. But you heard the word impossible and treated it as an invitation. That's just how we're wired, I guess. Something in our DNA that makes us too stupid to know when we're beaten. Not stupidity, faith. Faith in yourselves, in your abilities, in the fundamental possibility of success against any odds. Sorrel squeezed Sarah's hand gently. It is a powerful thing, that faith. Perhaps the most powerful thing in the universe. The news of Velthari's salvation spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours, every species in the Galactic Council knew what the humans had accomplished. Within days, the story had become legend. The young species that had looked at an impossible problem and simply refused to accept that it couldn't be solved. Ambassador Trelvok requested a formal audience with Chief Engineer Chen. He arrived at the Prometheus's observation deck looking distinctly uncomfortable, his tentacles twitching with something that might have been embarrassment. "Chief Engineer," he said, "I owe you an apology. I called your plan madness. I called your species arrogant and naive. I was wrong." Sarah nodded, graciously accepting the apology. "You weren't entirely wrong, Ambassador. We are arrogant. We do believe we can do anything, even when all evidence suggests otherwise. But sometimes that arrogance is exactly what's needed." "I don't understand you," Trelvok admitted. "Your species, I mean. My people have been spacefaring for 12,000 years. We have accumulated wisdom beyond measure. And yet, when faced with a crisis, we froze. We accepted defeat. You, with your 3 centuries of experience, refused to do the same. Why?" Sarah was silent for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I think it's because we haven't been around long enough to learn what's impossible. Your species has seen things fail over and over again. You've developed models and theories that tell you what can and can't be done. That wisdom is valuable, but it can also be a cage. It can make you stop trying before you've really begun. And humans don't have that cage. Not yet. Maybe we will someday. Maybe in 12,000 years we'll be just as cautious and conservative as everyone else. But right now, we're young enough to be foolish. Young enough to look at a dying star and think, I bet we can fix that." Trelvok's tentacles curled thoughtfully. "Perhaps there is value in that foolishness. Perhaps the galaxy needs species like yours to remind us that the boundaries we've drawn are not as solid as we believe." "Or maybe we just need each other," Sarah suggested. "Your wisdom and our stubbornness, your caution and our recklessness. Together, we might actually be able to accomplish something." The ambassador was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he extended a tentacle in the human gesture of handshake. "I believe I would like to see that, Chief Engineer. A galaxy where the impossible is merely a challenge waiting to be overcome." Sarah took his tentacle and shook it firmly. "Then stick around, Ambassador. We're just getting started." Across the Velthari system, celebrations erupted as the danger finally passed. The star, forever changed but alive, continued to shine on a world that should have died. High Priestess Sorrel led her people in a ceremony of thanksgiving, speaking words that would be remembered for generations. "We stand here today because of stubbornness," she said to the gathered billions. "The stubbornness of humans who refused to let us die. The stubbornness of engineers who looked at impossible physics and said, we can do better. The stubbornness of pilots who flew into the heart of a dying star and came out alive." She raised her arms to the sky, to the star that still burned above them. "Let us learn from them. Let us be stubborn in our hope, relentless in our pursuit of solutions, and unshakable in our belief that no problem is truly unsolvable. Let us be worthy of the gift we have been given." On the Prometheus, Sarah Chen watched the ceremony on the main view screen. Around her, her engineering team had finally allowed themselves to rest, sleeping in chairs and on floors, exhausted but triumphant. Captain Webb stood beside her, a cup of coffee in his hand. "So what's next for the Terran Engineering Corps?" Sarah smiled. "The Council has sent 17 new problems for us to look at, problems that were declared impossible decades or centuries ago. I figured we'd start with the easy ones." "The easy ones?" "You know, revering desertification on Kishi Prime, building stable wormholes in the void sector, developing faster-than-light communication that doesn't require relay stations." She laughed at Webb's expression. "I'm kidding. They're all impossible. That's the whole point." Webb shook his head, but he was smiling. "Sometimes I think your whole species is insane." "Probably," Sarah agreed, "but it's a productive kind of insanity." She looked out at the star they had saved, at the world that now had a future because a bunch of stubborn humans had refused to give up. "You know what my grandfather always said? He said that the universe is like a puzzle. Every piece fits somewhere if you're patient enough to find where. The galaxy looks at a piece and says, this doesn't fit anywhere. We look at the same piece and say, we just haven't found the right spot yet." "And you always find the right spot." "Not always. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we lose people. Sometimes we make things worse before we make them better. Sarah turned to face him, her eyes bright with something that might have been faith or might have been madness or might have been both. But we never stop trying. We never look at a problem and say, this can't be solved. Because the moment you accept that something is impossible, you've already lost. She raised her coffee cup in a toast. To stubbornness, to foolishness, to the beautiful, stupid, magnificent insanity of refusing to give up. Webb raised his own cup. To humanity. To humanity, Sarah agreed. The species too stubborn to know when it's beaten. Somewhere in the depths of space, a star that should have died continued to burn. A world that should have perished continued to thrive. And a young species, barely 3 centuries into its journey among the stars, prepared to tackle the next impossible challenge. Because that's what humans did. They looked at the universe with all its rules and limits and impossibilities, and they said, we can do better. And then they proved it.